So, my son is the first black male I have ever personally dealt with who grew up in a functional environment. And not necessarily grew up because he's only two. So, he's still growing up. But I just thought about how wild that was. And even when I try not to think about it too much, our interaction, it really shows. So this is what I mean. We even have this really stark contrast because we have our daughter too. So I mean, he and his sister, they're like right behind. Well, his sister's right behind him. So he's two, she's one, and I noticed that it's really easy for me to interact with her, and obviously it's natural because we're both females. But at the same time, you know, even dealing with him, a lot of times I will find myself correcting behaviors that I've seen my parents um, carry out, or even other black parents or people in the black community, how they will interact with their child. Now, I'm going to do the best that I can to break this down, and I'm sorry if it's lost on anybody, but this has been something that I've struggled with for a while, right? So let's just try. I'm gonna just try to unpack this whole my son being the first black male who grew up in a functional environment, because that's already a lot, right? So what I mean by that is my son is the first black male I have ever dealt with personally who grew up born with within wedlock. Parents are married. Parents are together. Both married parents are his biological parents. He doesn't just know who his father is, he has a very close knit relationship with his father. And the same with his mother, he knows me, he has a very close knit relationship with me. And I'll go ahead and state the not so obvious parts of that. First of all, let's start out with, the fact that he's born within wedlock, right? I keep hearing these statistics that like 8 out of 10 of black children are these days are born out of wedlock. So there's already a flag there. And then I guess the other part is with his parents being married, not only that, but we're his biological parents, right? So it's not like I'm his stepmom, like I'm his biological mom, and his dad is not his stepdad. That's his biological dad, right? Because a lot of times when I would interact with black guys, 9 times out of 10, their parents are not married, right? And then a lot of times they don't know their father, or a lot of times they may have a great relationship with their father, but they don't know their mother. And I used to think that was wild, especially when I was in the military. Particularly, I would meet guys who did not know their moms, and I used to think that was so crazy that they had such a tight relationship with like their dad's girlfriend or their dad's wife, their stepmom, but they wouldn't really have a relationship with their mom. So that was something interesting that I learned about after I graduated high school. So I thought I should just unpack that part real quick, right? So anyway, this is this is such a touchy topic for me because first of all, I want to be careful not to overstep my boundaries when talking about black men, because, and especially men in particular, because men live in a very different world than women do. Oftentimes, women, we have so many safety nets in society, and we have so many freedoms and the ability to express ourselves, especially here in the United States, where, there are women that I've heard would plan on being a single parent because there are so many resources here in the United States that enable women to pretty much raise their children in a government funded environment. Not that I'm trying to minimize, being on welfare or anything, but it's one thing to use system resources if you have unfortunate events, but I've heard so many women so many times be like, hey, if it don't work out, I'll just get on Section 8. I'll just get me some food stamps. Um, so with men on the other hand, I've seen guys who've raised their children by themselves, and when they go down, to the food stamp office or social services, they don't get nearly as many benefits. And if they do get anything, I mean, they got to really, go through all these processes to get the assistance. And even when they do get it, it's not nearly as much as women. But not to go too far on that. This topic for me is kind of difficult to unpack because it's so foreign and it's really tragic. I noticed I have my 2-year-old son, I have my 1-year-old daughter, and I noticed that when I interact with my daughter, it's like easy, it's seamless, and for obvious reasons. With both of us being females, of course, it's going to be easy, because I can understand and relate to her a lot better. On the flip side with my son, it's like, well, there are things that he does just because he's a boy. Like, if you take something like how he roughhouses and the way he plays with his toys, how rambunctious he is, just naturally, you just want to get up and he runs, and he's got this burst of energy. That boyish energy is one thing, but even the way that he thinks and how he processes things, it really throws me off. I'll give an example. Like, let's say if my daughter wants a hug, right? For her, it's just natural. She just walks up, she reaches, get a hug. Not a big deal. I used to think that a guy's ego kicked in when they hit puberty. My 2-year-old son is teaching me, like literally since the day he was born, and I am not exaggerating, he was macho from the second he breathed air. Like, he was always a boy, right? So like, even to this day, if he wants a hug, he has a dude way of doing it. If, for lack of better terms, this is what I mean. If he wants something, like, he will try to do something to earn it. So let's just remember the contrast. My daughter just walks up, reaches, hug, done. My son, when he wants a hug, first of all, I see him thinking for a second, like, what if, like, this whole rejection thing, like it's like he's already processing. Or I notice, like, when he's around his friends and playmates, he doesn't really try to hug much. Or like, if I call him like by his nickname, or if I treat him, nicely with endearing terms in front of his friends, even his friends kind of react like, oh, there go your mommy, and they don't really say it, they're still not really forming full sentences, but just their body language, just, they don't, the boys, they don't process things the way the girls do. And so going back to this whole him wanting a hug thing, it's a certain time and it's a certain way that he goes about it. And so the last time he wanted like a hug, he took some Legos and he put them together and he handed them to me, as a gift. Now, I was impressed with the fact that he was putting his Legos together because, most times he just take them apart, he just throw them around, he's always playing around with them. But the fact that he was learning how to build something, and the fact that he thought about, I would teach him his colors and I would show him what colors I liked. And he took time to figure out what colors I liked and put them together. And he gave the color of the Legos to me, and then he reached for a hug. And that just blew my mind because that's how his father is. Like, if my husband wants something, he doesn't just go, I want this, I should get it. He actually put thought into how he doesn't really even ask for anything. Now that I think about it, it's usually, he would do something really, really nice or buy me something really, really nice. And he would be like, hey, I was wondering if what you thought about this. And that's usually how it's pitched. It's never like, hey, I want affection, give it to me. And it just really, it really takes my mind to a different place, because there will be times when I even catch myself thinking like the people who are raising black sons in dysfunctional environments, how they'll be like, why don't you just ask for a hug like your sister? And it's like, I caught myself thinking that, but I never said it because I've seen how that affected, the black males that I grew up with, you know. Um, and as they get older and they try to talk about what their train of thought is, especially to women, a lot of times people would not listen to them. And it makes me wonder, like, are black men used to being heard, or even do black people, black men in particular, do people listen to them, or are people always coming up with demands? Because oftentimes when I hear people talking about black men, if they're not extremely successful, then they don't matter. And I think a lot of that has to do with, again, black men being raised in dysfunctional environments. Like, oftentimes I think about how good I got it. The fact that, my husband's a good man, he's a very good provider. The fact that my children, our children, are here with me 24/7, and I'm here to care for them 24/7. And the alternative to that, how detrimental it would be if they didn't have their father to go to for provision and me to go to for protection, is just, the words escape me even now. And right now, I'm even forced to really process, like, what it means to have a son, and how trying his upbringing is going to be. I mean, because I remember when I was growing up, I remember getting picked on because my parents were married, or women would have little comments about, how my mom thought she was all that because she had my dad's last name, which, that pick me, haterism, that's still here to this very day. When I was younger, I was oftentimes made to feel like I need to be more understanding of kids that didn't have their basic necessities because I was coming from a two-parent household. And now I'm thinking, like, if it was hard for me as a black female, especially around other females who did not come from a stable family structure, how much harder is it going to be for my son? And especially because, let's just be frank, I don't know any other black male personally where I can say they grew up in a functional household, where their father and their mother was married. Sometimes even when I talk to my husband about how we're raising our kids, it's so sad, because it's like the closest thing we can get to people that we can relate to is like, we know a lot of white married couples. They're married and they have their kids. And, sometimes some of them, they have blended families and stuff like that. But it's just so, I don't know the word. It's just, I don't want to say jarring. It's like you're in this void when, everybody always, in the black community, they're always talking about the right thing to do. They're always talking about the good thing to do. But when it comes to actually doing the right thing and doing the good thing, you're oftentimes criticized for doing that thing. For example, being married before you have kids. Before my husband and I had kids, before we got married or whatever, a lot of both sides of the family was like, hey, when you guys gonna have kids? And it's like, we didn't even get married yet. Why are we talking about kids? And even sometimes when I talk to my family and, people in the black community, sometimes they talk about, like, what if your son has a baby mama? And I'm like, ew. Like, it's just weird. But I guess it's so common that it's not weird. It's not strange for people to have those kind of talking points. But yeah, like, our son is, he's in a really special situation, because we don't really know any black men that are like, yeah, I grew up at home. And that's kind of crazy in 2025.